Hi, it's Louisa Dahl. And welcome to the Interactive Minds podcast, where I talk with passionate marketers, innovators, and digital leaders about their specific recipes for success. In today's show, I interview Jake Falkinder from Ignite Travel Group, talking about increasing brand trust. Here's 3 things you're going to learn. 1, how to deal with changing priorities. 2, how to bring on a brand ambassador. And 3, how you can think about the 0 moment of truth for your brand. Let's get into it. Today on the show, I'd like to welcome Jake Falkinder, who's the Marketing and Sales Director at Ignite Travel Group. Jake has over 15 years of experience working in marketing, sales, digital and media. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Thank you very much, Louisa. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It's great to have you here, and we'd like to start off by hearing a bit about your career to date. Tell us what you've been involved in over those 15 plus years.
Well, I've been involved in quite a variety of things over those 15 years, actually. I guess, believe it or not, for me, I started with a computer science degree, which is a little bit of a different style of study to some of my other peers within the world of marketing these days.
Yeah.
So I crafted a career around technology in the early days. I actually worked with a couple of the major Australian airlines in Qantas and Virgin Blue. Or was Virgin Blue at that stage, now
Yep.
Virgin Australia. And it was a really exciting time for aviation. It was also a bit of a tumultuous time for aviation. There was, it was a time when oil and gas was starting to become quite a fierce commodity that was starting to be priced a little bit more fiercely. I learned a lot about business in those early years as well as the technology side of things.
Excellent. And that is definitely something we don't come across all the time, to have that technical background, which I'm sure has set you in good stead for what you do now. When did you make that change from computer science to more of a marketing sales angle?
It was interesting, actually. In the Virgin office, which was based at that stage in Barry Parade there in Brisbane,
Yep.
there was an agency that was next door that I always saw cool people walking in and out of. And I was curious. There was an energy about those people. There was a bit of an energy about the entire office.
Yep.
And I was drawn to what could be an agency life, to the point where one day one of the guys said a bit of a hello, and I asked them what they got up to there.
Yep.
And after a bit more talking, we decided that might be a good place for me to test out something different.
Fantastic. That's really cool. And so what happened after that?
Well, it got even cooler after that, actually. This was JSA Digital, who was an agency that focused on digital solutions, marketing and digital solutions.
Yep.
They were eyeing off new markets, and one of those markets was the Middle East. So I actually was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to head on over to Abu Dhabi within about 3 months of starting with JSA.
Wow.
And ended up in a position a couple of months later where I was essentially managing that office in the Middle East. So it all actually happened quite quickly when I think about it. 1 minute I was jumping into an agency, and the next I was sitting in the middle of the desert, essentially, working with some very different clients.
Yeah, I bet. And that sounds like a massive transition from, computer science through to, I imagine, business development and client management and all that side of things. What was the kind of looking back, what was the biggest learning curve over that period?
There was so many learning curves running in parallel. Most definitely the business development side of things in comparison to computer science it's chalk and cheese, but I quite like that aspect. I'm a bit of a people person myself, so I enjoy the conversations around what businesses are out to achieve. So I was quite comfortable with that aspect. I think for me, one of the biggest things was culture, and its agency culture, plus overlaying a completely different culture to what we've got here in Australia. So that was definitely a bit of a learning curve for me. But I was up to the challenge. I was at that stage a bit younger and very keen to learn. So it was a great platform.
Fantastic. And so how long did you stay in the Middle East, and what happened after that?
I stayed in the Middle East for about 2 years. Again, I was fortunate enough to see another significant business event within the world, and that was the global financial crisis. And if there's anywhere that epitomizes the impacts of the GFC, it's probably Dubai, which is where I was based at that time.
Yeah.
The cranes were literally being disassembled. There was cars that were being parked at the airport still running, and essentially people that were fleeing the country for various reasons. So it was a real eye opener for me when the GFC hit in Dubai. It felt like the right time for me to come back to Australia as well. Just so, some of the work that we were working through was drying up. So I came back to Australia, and I joined a few other agencies here in Australia over the following years.
Great, excellent. And tell us about your current role now.
I have one of the best jobs, I think, in Australia. I'm working with Ignite Travel, so the sales and marketing director of the Ignite Travel business. We've had some tremendous growth here over the past couple of years. We're also working quite closely with Flight Centre, who has acquired a stake in our business recently, and more recently the entire stake of our business. So it's opened up lots of doors for us to expand into new areas.
Great. And Ignite Travel has a couple of brands within it. Can you tell us about those?
Yes, a couple is probably an understatement, Louisa. We're sitting at about 20 plus brands at the moment.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yes, so that doesn't come without its challenges. Obviously, we've got different tones of voice, different brands, different products, different websites. There's a lot to manage, which makes every day a very interesting day.
So what are some of those brands? Can you give us some examples, and how different are they in terms of their market and audience?
Yeah. So our first brand, My Holiday Centre, is a parent brand underneath sit about 13 brands at this point in time. As an example of some of those brands, we've got My Fiji, My Hawaii, My Maldives. You get the gist. The list goes on.
Yeah.
And essentially those brands are all about providing value-packed holidays to Australians. So, I can totally relate to the target demographic that we're talking to, having 2 young kids myself, but finding the best value and best rated accommodation, the best value flights, and the best things to do on a holiday can be a challenge. So what we've done is pull all of those elements together to essentially create a perfectly packaged holiday that you can literally buy off the shelf. So that's essentially the ethos of the My Holiday Centre brands. Then we've got a relatively new department here at Ignite called the Holiday Exclusives Department. And our founder, Randall Deere, has actually coined that area of travel flash travel. And what he means by that is essentially deals that are so quick that if you blink, you will miss them. They're obviously very retail focused. So talk about discounted holidays and percentages off. And it's all about spontaneity and getting in quickly or risking missing out. So that division's really grown for us rapidly. We've partnered with some really cool brands in Australia with the Holiday Exclusives division. So what we actually do is white label a lot of our holidays and then use distribution channels and closed user groups from other successful Australian businesses like Flight Centre and also Flybuys and quite a few other brands in there as well.
Wow, awesome. So how many in the marketing and sales team to manage all these brands?
We've just cracked the 20 actually, so 20 team members this year.
Excellent. That's less than one a brand.
It is. We would like to have one per brand. Most definitely there's room for a few more resources here. But we're a very, very busy team. We do all of our creative, all of our media buying, all of our digital marketing in-house.
Wow.
The team's always pretty busy.
Yeah. And is that team, how is that structured? Is that marketing and sales and digital and beyond, or is it separate in different ways?
Yeah, it's so the marketing team is divided into 3. We've got the digital team, which manages digital marketing, but also all of the content creation and upload. Yep. We've got a second division within the marketing team, which is focused on partnerships. So that's media partnerships, it's tourism bodies, and it's any other partnerships which fall within that area. And then the third area are the guys that run on the Apple Macs, the design team, and they produce upwards of about 100 press ads per month, as well as videos, as well as corporate collateral and other things.
Excellent. And in your title, you've got sales as well. How does that feed into this for you?
I work very closely with the sales manager. We've got a sales floor, which is all based here in Broadbeach. We're very proud of having a local sales team. And the phones ring literally 24/7. but we man that sales floor 12 hours per day. And I work very closely with that sales manager. It's great to hear the feedback that's coming through directly from customers, because we're obviously generating that inquiry that then comes through on the phones. So we're in frequent dialogue on a daily, if not hourly basis.
Yeah, excellent. And how have things changed for you with the investment from Flight Centre?
It's actually opened up a lot more doors than I expected it to quite quickly. So that final piece of the acquisition happened less than 2 months ago.
Right.
What we're already talking about is getting more of our product, and particularly that My Brands product, on Flight Centre shelves. So what you'll see at the moment, in a select number of Flight Centre stores, is our My Cruises product.
Yes.
Is actually already gracing the shelves, and that's something that has been enabled only since the acquisition took place.
Excellent. Cool. So I guess there's only more growth from that aspect now ahead.
Yes. As I mentioned before, there's 13 other brands within the My Holiday Centre stable. So getting those on the shelves is potentially something that we could look at as well. And then keeping in mind that Flight Centre is an international brand with retail stores throughout the world. That's also something that's going to be of interest to us pretty soon.
Excellent. So it sounds like you guys have a lot on. What does a typical day look like for you?
It's a good question. I like to think there's no typical day here. Despite Ignite now being in operation for 13 years, we still very much have an entrepreneurial, I should say, mindset.
Yep.
And essentially that means if we see something and we feel that it might work, we will prioritise that over other things that may already be happening. And we chase those opportunities down. So we're very dynamic. We're very ideas focused, and that means that my day to day, might sometimes have additional priorities or tasks slotted into it that weren't there when I wrote my to-do list at the start of the day.
Yeah, can you give us an example of something like that in terms of how you need to stay dynamic and adjust accordingly?
Yeah. The My Cruises example that I mentioned before, in getting My Cruises product onto the shelves, that was something that it was an immediate opportunity essentially once that merge and acquisition had taken place.
Yep.
We obviously already had our weeks set out for the next couple of weeks in terms of our priorities and upcoming campaigns. But immediately when that opportunity came to fruition, we prioritised that within the studio. And what I mean by that is we started creating brochures for the Flight Centre stores to be distributed. We started thinking about the impacts of essentially multi-branding, because we were looking at branding our My Cruises product with Flight Centre endorsement. So what does that look like from a brand perspective?
Yep.
Really started crafting out how that product range would fit within the Flight Centre stores. So the week prior, that wasn't on the cards. The following week, suddenly it was an opportunity that was there and ripe for the picking. So we ran for that. And obviously that really changed the priorities of that week.
Yeah, definitely. And when your priorities change like that, obviously other things have to get bumped down in priority. How is that received within the organisation, and how do you manage that?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are some priorities that aren't time bound, and obviously they're the ones that you can start to bump down the list. But we also have created a bit of an overflow model, particularly for our design team. So we do tap into a freelance network from time to time, but there's also a couple of former employees that have moved to other places or moved abroad.
Yep.
And they continue to support our needs when there is overflow work. So again, we can be quite dynamic with the amount of work that we need to cover in 1 week. That's been a real secret to our success in getting everything delivered that needs to be delivered on time.
Yeah.
Because obviously we're dealing with publishers who have dispatch deadlines and all of those great things as well.
Yeah. And would those overflow people be primarily in the kind of design area that you're using and the implementation then?
Yeah, mostly in design. There's also a couple within the digital world, particularly for copy. What we find is when we launch, for example, a new product range, what we need to do is create a unique set of copy that will be published on our websites, published in Ad Creative, and anywhere else, we're marketing that particular resort.
Yeah.
So when we have, again, more than we can handle, we look to freelancers to assist with that.
Perfect. Excellent. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit about a recent project you've been working on around brand trust. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, brand trust was an interesting one. What we did there is, well, I guess the reason that that project came about is through some studies that we did both internally and with our customers. And we do these every 6 months. But what we had noticed, and if you were to pick up the travel section of any newspaper on the weekend, you'll certainly see this, is that the world of travel, and particularly these packaged style of holidays that we're selling, has become quite cluttered. So we started doing a bit of analysis into that, and what we found is that some of our competitors were investing heavily in brand. They were investing heavily in even things like TV shows. And what they had actually done is eclipse us in certain metrics, like brand awareness. And we don't actually have a brand budget at all when it comes to advertising. We let our deals do the talking, and the brand is essentially the secondary point of focus. But yeah, we identified there was an opportunity for us to improve our trust and essentially our awareness of the brand in a very cluttered market. So that was the basis of the project and the reason that it came about.
Excellent. And were you measuring your brand trust on an ongoing basis, or is that something that you'd kind of just identified from what was happening in the market?
Yes, we do. We do 6 monthly check-ins on that. Obviously, because we don't invest a lot in brand, it doesn't make sense for us to be doing that more. But we also use Google Search Insights. I'm a real believer in you let the public do the telling. If they're searching for brands, they're obviously more popular and more top of mind. Of course, there are other factors that come into play, like major campaigns. But yeah, we use a lot of Google Search Insights just to monitor ourselves and our competitors as well.
Excellent. And when you're looking at that, what kind of metrics are you comparing there? And was it due to a decrease in that metric that I suppose made this project come about?
Yeah, I mean, what we're comparing against our competitors is certainly the amount of brand search that happens per month. We know that when our competitors, we do really thorough competitor monitoring on competitor activity in terms of their media placements and media strategies.
Yep.
So we can overlay what we see there with the brand search and essentially the customer intent we're seeing. But yeah, we're really just looking at search volume there. When we run the 6 monthly studies, we do look at other things like prompted and unprompted awareness, intent to book, and recognition of brands with certain styles of holidays. For example, a cruise package holiday as opposed to a cruise without all of the bells and whistles added.
Yep.
A package holiday versus booking accommodation. So we start to compare those metrics as well.
Excellent. And what tool or organisation do you use for some of these competitor insights?
Competitor insights, we actually work a lot. One of our key partners here is News Corp. So we work a lot with their research department on these studies.
Yep.
I guess going back to our discussion earlier about Flight Centre, they also do some studies which we can share insights across both businesses. We have a shared product range with Flight Centre called Flight Centre Exclusives. So we do a lot of measurement of that particular product range and then compare it to both of our separate product ranges across both businesses as well. So Excellent. They use YouGov.
Okay, fantastic. So when you identified that you needed to improve your brand's trust or that there was an opportunity to improve it, what did you do next? How did you go about doing this?
Yes, it was a bit of a multifaceted approach. So there were 3 things that we looked at. One of them was essentially bringing in a trusted face of travel to represent My Holiday Centre and all of its brands. So, essentially a brand ambassador. The second area was looking into, I guess, a bit of a refresh of the brand as it currently stood, and really redefining that brand so that customers could totally appreciate what the brand represents. And the third area was looking into what I call a zero moment of truth, which is a bit of a Googleism. But essentially what that means is, what does the customer see when they Google your brand? Obviously it might be reviews, it might be an ad, or it might be competitor ads, but what does a customer see and therefore perceive about your brand? So we essentially looked at all of those parts and created a strategy that was quite interwoven, and we had some pretty aggressive timelines, because essentially we were looking at, that would have been October 2018 that we started this project, and we wanted it all completed by the end of the year so that we were ready for the busiest time of year in January 2019.
Yeah, wow. And was this something that your existing team took on board, or did you kind of work with other external members or other to get it off the ground?
The majority of it was done with our existing team. We like to operate like an agency internally. So we'll create concepts and present them to our internal clients here at Ignite.
Yep.
So we did that for the creative refresh and also for our ambassador recommendations, which we ran by our CEO and founder. So yeah, we operate largely independently of external suppliers and providers. But we did bring in one or two experts where needed. As an example, there was a freelance brand consultant who was relatively locally based that we brought in to help run some brand workshops so that we could make sure that our definition of the brand was clear and sort of get an unbiased view from an external person as to whether that brand story made sense.
Excellent. Now tell us a bit more about the brand ambassador side of things, because I'm sure there was a lot involved in finding or identifying who could be a brand ambassador and bringing them on board. Can you tell us a bit about that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a bit of fun choosing someone to represent your brand. And obviously it's a long-term decision. It's not something that you want to take lightly. So yes, we did have a shortlist and we used a couple of interesting tools, some that we kind of pulled together ourselves and others that are sort of freely available just to analyse what we thought the perception of each of our potential candidates was. We found a sentiment analysis tool, for example, that essentially analyses tweets to work out what the sentiment is around each individual. So we ran all of our candidates through that, which was fun. But we also wanted someone that aligned with our target demographics as well. So some of that is through quite casual focus groups. And yeah, essentially, once we'd run a few of these individual experiments and collated the results, the person that we selected, Natalie Grozleski, was a completely obvious choice for us.
Awesome. Are you able to share the name of the tool that you used?
You're testing me now. I can't think of that off the top of my head. I might have to add that to your resources page.
No worries. We'll add it in the show notes later on. Excellent. So how long did that process take from, identifying that you wanted a brand ambassador to having one on board? So was that done within those few months you said?
Yes. So we'd actually been talking about a brand ambassador for 3 or 4 years. And then we made the decision after these insights around brand trust that we needed one pretty soon. So that process, after we decided we needed one pretty soon, probably took about 2 months.
Yep.
Including the negotiation side of things as well.
Yeah. And tell us, what was your intent or how have you used Natalie since she's been part of the brand?
Natalie is awesome in general as a human being. Particularly her skill set is awesome for what we set out to achieve. Natalie's had a lot of experience in front of the camera, obviously more recently with things like Farmer Wants a Wife, but also with Getaway, news reading, and also the weather. So Natalie in front of the camera and interviewing is completely natural to Nat. So we really leveraged that. We actually flew Nat and a crew of a camera team and production team over to Fiji in late 2018 as well. And we produced so much content that you would not believe. We produced over 30 videos. We had a wish list that was as long as my arm in case we freed up any additional time.
Yep.
But yeah, essentially shot 12-hour days for 5 days straight in 35-degree heat. To really make the most of that opportunity of being in destination with Nat. And we got some great footage. She mingled with guests and had that vox pop style of interview with them. So we got some great testimonial style content as well, but also some more commercial style content that we then used for a campaign that launched in January. So that's our style with Nat, is really to shoot to her strengths. And yeah, it's been really successful for us.
Excellent. And so that content that you recorded then and produced then, has that been feeding you for the year, or have you had to kind of go back and create more over time?
Yes. For Fiji particularly, it's been feeding us for the year. We are quite strategic in picking opportunities for Nat to be in other destinations. So as an example, Nat was recently in Hawaii, where we did a bit more of it was a more brief shoot. So it was only a half-day shoot for that particular one. But for our flagship destinations particularly, we like Nat to experience a destination, and then we use that as part of our advertising creative moving forward as evergreen content.
Excellent. And if someone else wanted to do something similar and find and bring on a brand ambassador, what have you learnt over this period that might shortcut that process a little bit for them or provide them some tips on how to get started?
Yeah, I mean, I would begin with the end in mind and what you really see that brand ambassador doing. For us, it was always about presenting our deals and why our deals were spectacular deals to the public. So we knew that someone who was comfortable to camera was the key. And we also, Nat's credibility within the travel space is undeniable. So it was beginning with the end in mind of the style of content we were going to create. So I would, the fun part is obviously starting to choose the potential individuals, but scrunch that bit of paper up first, write down what it is you feel that you might want to achieve with that brand ambassador, and then start picking, set yourself a criteria and start picking out potential candidates based on that.
Yeah. And what do you see happening for you next in this space? Will you continue working with Nat, and have you considered bringing on other brand ambassadors as well?
Yes, I mean, to answer the first question around working with Nat, most definitely. We've only scraped the surface of our destinations with Nat. So I guess the next phase is Nat experiencing more of our destinations and bringing back those experiences to the public. There's a lot more content for us to produce, considering our range of destinations also continues to increase.
Yeah.
I guess in terms of looking at other brand ambassadors, we're happy with Natalie here in the Australian market because of the recognition that she's got here as a travel authority. If we're to look at other markets, for example, the New Zealand market, and launch our brands over there, then we'll certainly need to start thinking about whether we get a local brand ambassador within those markets.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously you've been producing a whole bunch of special content around this arrangement. Has that replaced other content that you were doing previously, or has that been kind of added into the mix in terms of what you're putting out there?
I mean, where possible, we splice in existing content. The destinations that we're dealing with are absolutely beautiful, and there's some hero images and hero moving imagery that we almost must use to sell the destination for it. So in those cases, we splice existing content.
Yep.
I guess what we're looking to do over the next year or two is essentially replace the existing stock style of content with our own. That really helps grow that trust as well. Anyone can create a website, grab some stock imagery from Getty Images, and essentially start selling holidays within a couple of days. Or appear to be selling holidays at least within a couple of days. That's not hard to do, but getting your own imagery, your own ambassador experiencing those holidays, it just allows us to stand out from the clutter. Yeah.
And how do you measure the impact that this has had, particularly from that brand ambassador side of things? We'll come back to kind of the whole brand trust project separately, but for this component, is there a way that you're kind of measuring the impact?
Well, some of it is related back to those brand metrics. So what we're finding is that Natalie is now synonymous with the My Holiday Centre brand. People are obviously starting to put two and two together in terms of the brand association there, which is carrying both Natalie's personal brand and also the My Holiday Centre brand in a northwards direction in terms of recognition and that top of mind awareness around travel.
Excellent.
A lot of those studies that I mentioned earlier are things that we continue to monitor. Again, looking at Google search trends, we're noticing things year on year are up in terms of the number of brand searches. And then we deep dive into that every 6 months with those brand awareness and brand intent studies as well.
Excellent. And I'm keen to hear a bit more around your zero moment of truth component to this project too. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
The ZMOT, I like to call it.
Yes.
So this, some of this is related directly to online reputation. Some of this is a bit more broad and probably a little bit more philosophical, but there's two particular behaviours that we find when people see a deal for the first time and may not have heard of the travel provider. One of those is that they might jump onto Google and search for example, My Holiday Centre review. And the second scenario is that they look at the ad, decide that package is something they're interested in, and go straight to your website and start making their own judgments based on what they see there. So we've kind of got the Google ecosystem that we're looking at, and that, the people that gravitate towards Google, and then we've got the people that jump straight on our site. And we need to cater for both of those situations and make sure that we are coming across as the most trusted as possible. And essentially what that's involved is us looking at all of those review platforms, looking at, the habits of people. Are they visiting product review more than they're looking at Google reviews? How do those sites rate within Google organic search results? And also how do we integrate, those ratings and rating systems within our own websites so that once people are on our websites, they don't disappear to go and search. So it's been, it's quite an interwoven web, and been a really interesting project. But a lot of it's just been having a bit more rigor around, what's going on within each of those individual review platforms and responding to it and just being a bit more active.
Yeah. Were reviews something that you were focused on in the past, or has this kind of given it a new focus for the business?
It's given us a new focus. We're pretty regimented in that we'll go and check in on the review platforms on a daily basis, and there are some cool tools out there that can aggregate all of that to save you a bit of time as well.
Yep.
We then use the feedback to speak not only across teams here with the sales teams, to get immediate customer feedback on things like customer service and response times and things like that, but we also take the insights back to our product team who are creating the deals. Because what we find sometimes, as an example, is we might create a deal that is more targeted to couples, but then find that it's really resonating with families. They're just struggling to find a room type that will fit themselves and their 2 kids.
Right. Yeah.
So we can then take those insights back to our product team and sort of repackage the deal so it suits both demographics. And then, the product develops in the favour of our customers.
And as part of this, are you now encouraging reviews in a different way from your customers?
I wouldn't say in a different way. We're very encouraging of reviews, good or bad, because they can only help us in the trajectory of where we want to go.
Yep.
But of course, the reviews that are the ones that are a bit more negative are the ones we see as the immediate opportunities to improve our business.
Excellent. And so all up, this project that you've been working on for Brand Trust has had 3 elements, and you've done it over I suppose you started this over a fairly tight time frame, and some of these elements sound like they're ongoing. What's been the outcome of this project for you?
The outcome, from a commercial perspective, and taking aside those softer metrics, the things like brand awareness, the outcome for us is focused on business results. So essentially more leads converting to more sales.
Yep.
And what we saw in January as a result of what I would say was quite an accelerated path, was the best January that we'd ever had in the history of My Holiday Centre. So the culmination of the shoot, the new brand, the brand ambassador, focusing on our online reputation, it certainly had a great result. And we've seen those results consistently throughout the following months in 2019.
Nice. That must be something you're proud of for sure.
I do hang my hat on that, yes.
If you were starting this project again, is there anything you'd do differently?
Yeah, that's a good question. It would have been nice to have more time. There are a few things that obviously we had to make very short, sharp decisions on. Having a bit more time, we may have done things slightly differently. But having said that, all of the fundamentals we got right. So, yeah, if the luxury of time would have been nice to plan a few more things out a bit more thoroughly.
Yep.
Other than that, no, we did a good job.
Fantastic. Excellent. Now, as part of this podcast, I always like to ask the people we're speaking to how you manage your time or your team, your calendar and your emails and those types of day-to-day elements. Can you share anything that you do around there that you think helps you with your productivity and your work?
Yes. When it comes to managing emails specifically, I'm not big on checking in on the inbox at 3 p.m. and 12 p.m. I know there are models that suggest that that's a good way of practice, but for me, I find emails a bit of a distraction if you use them to create task lists. So I look at them as essentially a secondary way of communicating. The way that I like to focus on planning out my days and also my team's days is to focus on the tasks at hand. The Ignite ethos is very open and communicative. We've got an open plan office, so everyone knows what the key priorities are. They don't need to jump into an inbox to look at that.
Yep.
And what we do in terms of allowing visibility of the priorities, particularly in the marketing team, is use the Trello platform, which anyone can access from anywhere. It's a bit like a virtual whiteboard full of Post-it notes. You can move the notes around and assign them to individual people, add your comments on underneath in terms of updates and status and questions.
Yep.
And it provides everyone with that central platform of what's going on, what's the most important thing right now, and when does it need to be done. So we use Trello a lot. We use it for projects. We use it for task management in the studio. And we found it really effective.
Excellent. Good tip. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. If people want to follow up with you after the show, how can they get in touch?
I'm the only Jake Falkinder on LinkedIn, so you can search me there and no doubt I'll pop up.
Excellent. That's not everyone can say that these days. There's often a lot.
It's actually pretty handy.
Yeah, definitely.
You can also, if you're interested in the world of travel content and my own travels, I've got an Instagram account called The Freedom Chaser. So if you're interested in seeing a few of our holidays firsthand and my perspective of them, you can find me there as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on the podcast and for sharing all of your knowledge around this brand trust project and lots more. We've really appreciated it. Thanks for being here.
It's an absolute pleasure, Louisa. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please remember to subscribe. My recommended action item from today's show is to look at Google Search Insights for your brand and to make sure you're getting some valuable data from this tool. Please join me in the Interactive Minds Facebook group, where hundreds of marketers have discussions, answer questions, and I share the latest news I'm seeing in the industry. You can access today's show notes at interactiveminds.com/podcast. See you next week.